All right, let's get right into it. We're going to zoom in on a single chapter from the ancient book of Lamentations. But here's the thing, this isn't just any chapter. According to our source, Dr. Leslie Allen, Chapter 5 is a massive turning point in how a community even begins to process a trauma that's completely overwhelming.
To really get this, you have to try and imagine the kind of grief we're talking about. I mean, this isn't just sadness. This is a total, all-consuming devastation that has shattered an entire nation. It's a sorrow so vast, so comprehensive, that for 4 whole chapters, the writers used this super specific poetic structure to get it all out. They literally documented their pain from A to Z. So what is this structure? It's called an acrostic. For the first 4 chapters of Lamentations, each verse starts with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Think about that. It's a way of saying we have cataloged every single aspect of our suffering from beginning to absolute end. It's this incredibly structured, exhaustive, and, complete expression of pain. So this sets up the crucial question, right? What happens next? After you've gone through every single facet of your sorrow from A to Z, where do you go? What do you do when the very structure that helped you contain your grief is finally used up? And that's exactly where Chapter 5 comes in. Everything shifts. I mean, the pain is still there. It's just as raw as ever, but something new is starting to happen. It's like the community can finally start to picture a different future, and they're resolving to move in that new direction. The first most obvious sign of this change is in the structure itself. That A to Z acrostic, it's gone. Now, the poem still has 22 verses, which is kind of like a nod to the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, but the strict format has been totally abandoned. Dr. Allen suggests this is on purpose. It's a signal that they're starting over, they're doing something different now. And check this out. Here's the second big change, the rhythm. The first 4 chapters used what's called a limping meter. It's got this 3-beat first half and a shorter 2-beat second half. It literally sounds incomplete, like a sigh of disappointment. But in Chapter 5, that all changes. It shifts to a regular, balanced 3+3 meter. The grief isn't gone, not at all. But like Dr. Allen says, change is in the air, and you can actually hear it in the new rhythm.
So what is this new form that takes its place? Well, it's a prayer. But as we're about to see, this is a very strange kind of prayer. It's one that mixes the sacred with this incredibly raw human experience of just suffering.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The whole chapter is framed as a prayer to God, but get this. The vast majority of it, 17 out of 22 verses, is just a detailed, almost secular-sounding list of what they're going through. God is hardly even mentioned in the middle. It's a prayer, yes, but it feels more like a funeral song.
So let's look at how it's built. You can actually think of it like a prayer sandwich. The prayer part is the bread, right? It starts and ends the chapter. But the filling, the main substance, is that long, raw list of all their grievances. Dr. Allen says the prayer essentially puts its arms around all that human pain and brings the whole package unfiltered directly to God.
Now, you might think this is just a big complaint session, but it's way more strategic than that. Dr. Allen explains that in the ancient world, prayer was a form of persuasion. To get God's attention, you had to make a really good, reasonable case for why God should step in, and that's exactly what Chapter 5 is doing.
The prayer kicks off with this really direct request. The word remember here doesn't just mean, hey, don't forget. It's a call for action. It means remember and do something about it. And look at the word they use, disgrace. This shows that their suffering isn't just physical, it's about humiliation, about losing who they are. They're asking for a restoration that goes way deeper than just their circumstances.
So how do they build this case? Well, they lay out the evidence piece by piece. Verses 2 through 5 list all their specific losses. Their ancestral land? Gone, given to strangers. Their social standing? Vanished. They feel like orphans. They have to actually pay for basic things like water and wood from their own land. And they're being worked to the bone with no rest. Every single one of these points is a reason designed to get God to act.
And this is where their argument gets really, really clever. The loss they're experiencing isn't just human, it's theological. God had promised them this incredible land of abundance, a place where they would lack nothing. But now, under foreign rule, that promise looks broken. So this isn't just their problem anymore, it actually affects God's reputation. It's a powerful way of saying, hey God, your own interests are on the line here too. Okay, so now we get to one of the most complex, but also one of the most important parts of the chapter, how the community deals with sin. But it's not a simple confession. It's about connecting the dots between what happened in the past and the pain they're in right now.
This verse is absolutely key. Now, on the surface, it might sound like they're just blaming their ancestors, right? It's their fault, not ours. And some people have pointed out that this seems to contradict other parts where the current generation admits their own sin. But Dr. Allen argues that something much, much deeper is going on.
What the text is really describing here is a concept called generational solidarity. It's not about passing the buck. It's about acknowledging a shared national responsibility. The idea is that the rot set in with a previous generation, maybe through some shady deals with foreign powers, and those decisions started a chain reaction. The nation's past sins, their past debts, have finally caught up to the present generation. They're the ones bearing the consequences. It's a way of saying, this disaster didn't just come out of nowhere. It has roots.
And that leaves us right here, at the central tension of this incredible turning point. Chapter 5 shows a community that has finally found the strength to turn back to God and look toward the future. But to do that, they have to deal with the raw pain of their present while also shouldering the consequences of their collective past. And that raises a powerful question, one that's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago.